Health is wealth, and I treat my body like a temple. I eat a lot of fruits and vegetables, and I love apples. So today we are going to be making this apple-inspired dessert that is composed of a caramelized white chocolate ganache, a salted caramel apple compote, and a Muscovado sponge cake. This recipe is packed with texture, warm flavors, and is perfectly balanced. So if you're a professional athlete like me and you need to make sure you get in all those servings of fresh fruits, keep watching. We are going to start this recipe off with our Muscovado cake. Muscovado sugar is an unrefined sugar that holds a lot of moisture and molasses. It's characterized as having a lot of warm notes such as maple, coffee, gingerbread, and chocolate. Muscovado sugar has a really beautiful and unique flavor, so if you can find it at your local supermarket, I definitely recommend picking it up and trying it when you get home, not like in the supermarket. But if you cannot get Muscovado sugar, you can replace this for dark brown sugar. In the sponge cake, we are also going to be adding in caramelized white chocolate. And the chocolate that I'm going to be using for this recipe is Michel Cluzel Kewane. This chocolate is so buttery and also contains a lot of those warm notes that we want to continue to reinforce throughout this recipe. So we are going to place 154 grams or 11 tablespoons of room temperature butter and 150 grams or 3/4 cup of Muscovado sugar in a bowl and paddle that until it is smooth. Once it's smooth, we're going to add in 1 large egg and 1 large egg yolk and paddle that until it is well incorporated. Then we can remove this and add in 80 grams or ½ cup of our caramelized white chocolate and mix it in with our spatula. Lastly, we are going to sift together 90 grams or 3/4 cup of all-purpose flour and 4 grams or 1 teaspoon of baking powder. Give that a little whisk to ensure that all of the baking powder is evenly distributed and fold that into the wet base. Then we're going to line a small sheet tray with parchment paper. Spread our cake batter evenly and bake this at 325 for 8 to 10 minutes. You'll know that your cake is ready when it looks something like this and a toothpick comes out clean. Now let's move on to our salted caramel compote. I used to absolutely love caramel apples when I was a kid, and I guess I still do. We are going to make a dry caramel with 100 grams or ½ cup of sugar. You're just going to place your pot over medium heat and sprinkle in thin and even layers of sugar, allowing each sugar layer to caramelize in between. And you can manipulate the heat as necessary. Once you've caramelized all of your sugar, we are going to deglaze the hot caramel with 100 grams or ½ cup of heavy cream. Add the cream in very, very slowly, making sure to mix it completely after each addition. When you're adding cream into a super hot caramel, there's such a drastic temperature difference between the two ingredients that it will bubble violently. So don't use a small pot and be careful. You also don't want to add in your cream too quickly because then you won't be able to control that bubble reaction and the cold cream will seize in the center of the caramel and you'll have a super hard caramel chunk that you won't be able to dissolve. And add in just a pinch of salt. Now add in 42 grams or 3 tablespoons of butter and stir that to dissolve. Now we can set that caramel aside while we move on to cooking our apples. Here I'm peeling 2 medium-sized Granny Smith apples and cutting them into small dice. I'm using Granny Smith apples for this recipe because the acidity that's in them will create a nice contrast in this recipe. Granny Smith apples also have a really great and crisp texture that will hold its shape even after we've cooked it down. Once you've diced all of your apples, we're going to place them into a pot and cook them until they soften. Do not cook these to mush, you still want them to hold some of that texture. Then we're going to add in 42 grams or 3 tablespoons of butter to this and then just stir to coat all of the apples in the butter. Now we can transfer this into a clean bowl and pour our caramel over and mix it. Here I am spooning the apple compote into this demi-sphere mold, cleaning up the edges, and then this can go into the freezer to solidify. Now let's move on to our Kewane Ganache Monte or whipped ganache. I have been really enjoying making whipped ganaches lately instead of mousse because the flavor you want to showcase really shines in a whipped ganache. That's because you have less fat in a whipped ganache than you do in a mousse. In a mousse, not only do you have egg yolks, which are all fat, you also have concentrated sugar because we typically cook the sugar syrup to 118 degrees Celsius, which will concentrate that sweet flavor. That plus the additional fat from the egg yolks will coat your tongue and can really place subtle flavors in the back burner. So making a Ganache Monte really gives you that satisfying moussey texture while still showcasing your flavors much more. We are going to place 175 grams or 3/4 cup of cream in a pot with 21 grams or 1 tablespoon of honey and bring that to a boil. Once that boils, we are going to stir in 4 grams or 2 sheets of bloomed gelatin and then pour that hot mixture over 160 grams or 1 cup of Kewane caramelized white chocolate. You want to let this sit for about 1 minute so that all of that chocolate can dissolve, and then stir it to make everything silky smooth. And finally, we are going to pour in 231 grams or 1 cup of cold cream and give that one more stir to combine. Then we can suffocate this with saran wrap and place it in the refrigerator overnight to crystallize. When we are ready to assemble our dessert, we're going to pull that Ganache Monte out of the fridge and place it into the bowl of our stand mixer and whip that to medium peaks and then place that into a piping bag. Now we have to put together our caramel apple compote. The way that I did this was I placed the pan over really low heat and then I gently glided the base of the demi-sphere mold just to melt it ever so slightly, and then the two halves should come together pretty easily as long as you cleaned those edges well before putting them into the freezer. And then repeat this until you have finished all of your compote. Lastly, we need to cut out that Muscovado sponge. I'm using a ring cutter that is slightly smaller than my silicone mold. That's just because the next size up I had was a little bit too big. So it's better for it to be a little smaller than for it to be a little bigger. Now we are going to pipe the whipped ganache about 3/4 up the side of the mold and place the compote inside and push it in ever so gently. You want to envision that compote hovering in the center of our dessert, so don't push it all the way to the top. Then you're going to cover the compote with more ganache and finally place the Muscovado cake and push it so that it sits flush with the mold. If any of your ganache came out of the edges while you were pushing the cake down, just clean it up and then this can go into the freezer until it is solid. While these are freezing, let's move on to our glazes. Yes, plural. For our first glaze, it is very easy. It's a simple cocoa butter coating. We are going to take 240 grams or 2 cups of white chocolate. The chocolate that I'm using for this recipe is Ivory by Michelle Cluzel, and 60 grams or 1/4 cup of cocoa butter. We are going to melt these two separately. I melted the white chocolate in the microwave in 30-second increments, stirring after each burst, and then I melted the cocoa butter in a pot over medium heat on the stove. And then we are going to combine those two. The reason that I didn't put them both in a bowl and melt them together is because the cocoa butter has a much higher melting point than the white chocolate does. So our white chocolate will burn before the cocoa butter is melted. Now I'm going to begin adding in green food coloring until I am happy with the color. I placed a real Granny Smith apple alongside to kind of use that as a reference, and this ended up taking me about 10 to 12 drops of green apple food coloring. Now our first glaze is done and we can move on to our nappage clear glaze. This one is also super simple. All you need to do is bring 225 grams or 2/3 cup of glucose syrup, 225 grams or 1 cup and 2 tablespoons of sugar, and 120 grams or half a cup of water to a boil. And once it boils, we are going to dissolve in 18 grams or 7 sheets of gelatin. Now our apples should be frozen and we are ready to unmold them and glaze them. I am going to stick them with a skewer or a toothpick and give it one dip in the cocoa butter coating. You want to give it one good confident dip and allow all of the excess to drip off. Since the apples are really frozen, the coating should solidify almost immediately. Once it goes kind of matte, we are going to dip it into our clear nappage glaze. Then we can just set these aside for a second. Now there is one more very optional finishing touch, and that is creating little temper chocolate stems. I'm going to teach you guys a super ridiculously easy way to temper chocolate at home. And the way that you're going to do that is by taking a handful of your chocolate. I'm using a dark chocolate here to really get that dark color. And what we are going to do is place this into the microwave in 20-second bursts until about 50 to 60% of that chocolate is melted. You want to make sure that after each round in the microwave, you're pulling it out and giving it a good stir. Once about 50 to 60% of your chocolate is melted, you're going to take it out of the microwave and stir the chocolate for a few minutes until all of that chocolate has dissolved. Now your chocolate is in temper and ready to go. And you can do a little test swipe on your table, and in a few minutes it should set up. And that's how you know your chocolate is in temper. The way our chocolate is tempered right now is because we did not break the original temper that the chocolate came in. When we buy chocolate, it's perfectly tempered for us, ready to go, meaning that it's shiny and it has that nice crispy snap. So the way that we did this is by gently heating up the chocolate to a point where it has melted. We did not take it hot enough to a point where we compromise the crystal structure that is present in the chocolate. But basically, we didn't break the temper. Sometimes you can take that chocolate just a degree or two too far and you've began to compromise the crystal structure in the chocolate. So sometimes doing it this way, your chocolate isn't as shiny. So the way that I'm making these stems is just placing the chocolate into a cornet and just doing these little squiggly stem motions. Once your stem's set up, you can gently pick them up, place them in the same hole that that skewer was in, and once these apples defrost, we are ready to dig in. That is it for another recipe. That green apple color ended up being pretty accurate, and we are living in an era where the person standing next to you might be a cake. You guys know me, health is wealth, and I only put the best of the best into this body. I especially love this recipe because, as we all know, our eyes and our brain are connected, and my body doesn't know that I'm eating cake. It thinks I'm eating an apple. I'm just kidding, you guys. Obviously, make sure that you are eating a lot of real fruits and vegetables. A fun fact about me is that about 90% of my diet is actually dairy and gluten-free. Yeah, that might be a big shock to some of you guys because I'm a pastry chef. So everything should be enjoyed in moderation. These desserts are the perfect portion size. I would absolutely recommend picking up this mold, picking up those demi-sphere molds. Everything will be linked on my Amazon page in the description bar below. And don't forget to like and subscribe and comment down below some other recipes you guys want to see me make. You can also follow me on TikTok and Instagram for more recipes, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye. Let me get a good bite with a little bit of everything. Divine. Decadent. Delicious. Amazing.
the like and subscribe button and comment down below of what you want me to do.
And I absolutely love it when you guys try my desserts out and you send me messages on Instagram. It's the funnest thing interacting with you guys all over the world.